If I wanted, I could probably have a 296. But it would involve losing this, and it would involve losing the F12. And I probably would lose at least some money, 100 grand or something like that. I'm not sure I'm comfortable losing that amount of money on a car just yet.
You could probably start to think about how that can be offset, given you got the 7-year servicing and the 5-year warranty.
Well, that's man maths of the highest order. I mean, I'm proud of that man maths. Hello everybody, today on JayEmm Friends, once again it's me, JayEmm, with and friend, in this case Mr. Anthony Marcano, and we are discussing, I think, a very interesting topic, or I hope a very interesting topic, which is the supercar dead?
And of course, we are in a supercar, James's 430 Scuderia, which I've driven many times before, and I absolutely love this car. I've often said to him, when he's ready to move it on, let me know, just in case I happen to be in a position to take it off his hands.
Well, be careful what you wish for, but on that topic, it was actually that exact discussion that got us thinking about making this video, because we realised that when we talk about supercars, as let's face it, we do kind of all the time, we're almost always talking about old ones. Aventadors, Murcielagos, Diablo, Countach, stuff like this, 458, you know, none of these are actually new cars now. You know, an Aventador is what, 12 years old? You know, 2011? Your McLaren 12C, that's 12 years old, same year. The 650 is only a couple of years younger. You know, the Murcielago came out, what, 2003? Something like that?
Very early 2000s.
Yeah, and I know it's painful to think about, but that was 20 years ago. And there is new stuff coming out. There are new supercars coming out, but we never talk about the Ferrari 296. We don't really even talk about the Revuelto.
And we don't even talk about the Artura.
No.
That's a current supercar.
Is anyone talking about the Artura?
No comment.
I mean, the MC20. I mean, they're out there. They're being delivered. People have got them, but I'm not really seeing much excitement or discussion. Now, the Lotus Emira, people are constantly talking about that. The 911s, people are always talking about those. You know, there's the constant rumours about whether Nissan actually will replace the R35 GTR, which at this point in time, I mean, it feels like it's just going to keep going. And in 10 years in Japan, they'll still be bringing out new versions. But for the supercar, I think it's complicated. And I think it's probably best we actually start this discussion with our definition, because that's a tricky topic in of itself.
Exactly, because the GTR, the Emira, most of the 911s, in fact, I don't think
all 911s.
All 911s, none of those are really what we would think of as supercars.
I mean, even, and someone's going to mention it, the 911 GT1. Fact is, that was a nuts, crazy homologation special from, you know, a quarter of a century ago that isn't really much of a 911 anyway, so...
Exactly, except in designation, but...
Yeah,
you can't really count the homologation specials will sometimes fall into that category. But for me, and this is something that I think we've always agreed on, a supercar has kind of got to be a car that really has no other purpose other than to be driven hard. It kind of has to be at a certain kind of performance level for its time, because if it was ever a supercar, it stays a supercar,
yeah.
even if it wouldn't be today by today's standards.
Yeah, it's like being president. Once you're president, you're always Mr. President. You know, so a 355 is still a supercar, just an old one. Like, yes, I know it will be blown away by an A45, but that's not the point. A45s didn't exist when it came out.
Yeah, so top of the line performance, but also for both of us, I think generally speaking, the engine rear mid-mounted.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of making a statement. It's saying, I have no other purpose other than to be fast and dynamic to drive. The engine is strapped to your back and it's designed to just deliver the ultimate driving experience.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be flamboyant and everything else, and I think it's really, really easy for people to get lost in the performance stats, because people always say, oh, but you know, my M5 is just as fast as a Ferrari, therefore it's a supercar. It's like, well, no, it's Fast 5 Series. This for me is also why 911 has never really ever been a bona fide card-carrying supercar, because first off, there's loads of them, and that is a bit of the supercar thing. Like, you could take a really, really, really nice 911. I've driven lots of really cool stuff. We've driven the GT3 and all that sort of stuff, and you drive it through a town and nobody notices. Like,
maybe the odd car enthusiast, but
Yeah.
a supercar is noticed by everyone,
Yeah.
whether they're a car enthusiast or not. But it's not just about the engine being behind you. I think it has to have a certain level of performance, at
Yeah.
the top level of performance. Although we have the concept of a hypercar,
Yeah.
thanks McLaren F1.
Yeah, well, we'll get onto that in a bit, but you're right, it's got to perform. The numbers certainly have to be impressive for their day. Now, probably the most controversial supercar, I think, in terms of the what is or isn't of the last 20 years, has got to be the Audi R8.
Yep.
In particular, the V8 one. Because I think most people will agree that the V10 is a supercar. But for me, it's important that the V8 is recognised as a supercar, because to me, if you want to say the V10 is and the V8 isn't, actually to me that means neither of them are. Because it's like saying, well, a Golf is a supercar now because we've put a V8 in it. Like, no, it's just a V8 Golf.
Yeah.
You've got to remember that the R8 V8 came out in what, 2007?
Yeah.
Thereabouts?
Performance-wise.
Yeah, and the Ferrari 360 had only just been retired, and that was 400 horsepower. And the R8 V8 was 420, so I don't think it's that far off. And it looked exotic, engine in the right place. It was probably better value than many other supercars out there. That might actually sort of count it against it, because a supercar's got to be a rare thing, an expensive thing, exotic materials, that sort of stuff. But I think it just about counted, and it has that wow factor. People look at it, people go, cool. My Lotus Evora, I consider it to be like 2/3 supercar. Looks a bit supercar, drives really nice, makes a great noise, but not expensive enough, not fast enough.
Yeah, and obviously, Evora, Emira, especially the Emira, a lot of people call it a baby supercar, but they don't mean it's a supercar.
No.
The R8 V8, I would say at the time, it was your entry-level supercar.
Yeah.
And it actually made supercar ownership just slightly more accessible, but not so accessible that anyone could just go out and buy one.
Yeah, I mean, just like the NSX did years before. And the NSX, I think most people would agree, is basically a supercar, because the whole idea was it was basically like a Ferrari 348 or 355, but it was a bit cheaper and it worked.
And if you disagree, then you're disagreeing with Ayrton Senna. Think about it.
Times have changed. We have lots and lots of great supercars from history, but what's happened that makes me think the supercar is dying just a little bit? Well, it's several things. First off, they don't sound like that anymore.
Nope.
They just don't. I mean, I'm sure the new Lamborghini Revuelto is going to sound pretty decent because it's still got a naturally aspirated V12, but cars just don't sound that loud, and not just loud, but that interesting anymore. The Maserati MC20, I mean, to me, it's almost killed single-handedly by the way it sounds. It's not good enough. And it's got a bit of drama and a bit of everything and all that stuff, but you're just like, when it goes past, you're like, sounds like a Giulia.
So when Demise and I decided to gate crash the Gumball 3000 last month, we took the R8, went on the same roads, and we were going through the Hatfield Tunnel. Suddenly, out of nowhere, this MC20 comes past. And we were like, we didn't even hear it. We're in a tunnel. And a supercar was driving next to us, and we'd actually let off at that point. We were just cruising. I didn't even hear it. It was
tragic.
silent.
That's tragic.
Oh, it was awful.
That's one element of it. The engines are also, by and large, becoming downsized. So the V6 in the Ferrari, the McLaren, the V6 in the Maserati, and to me, the engine is always a big part of what's made a supercar quite so special, and has in a lot of ways, to me, justified the price. Yes, a Lamborghini is expensive because it has a beautiful, amazing, handmade, naturally aspirated, high-revving V12 that's just one of God's gifts to man. The Ferrari V8s, this car is one of a very proud lineage of amazing V8s. And yeah, sure, okay, a V8 is maybe a little bit less special than a V12, but a Ferrari V8 is not like your regular, American, big displacement kind of cross-plane crank thing. But now, you're getting cars that have, in say the Maserati's case, essentially the same engine as in a fast hatchback. Now the Ferrari and McLaren engines are a bit different. I think Ferrari have managed the transition better than anyone else because the 296 does seem to sound quite decent.
Yeah.
The McLaren's just flat. I don't know what it is in McLaren. They've always struggled to get their cars to make a good noise.
But we found one 720 that it sounded pretty epic, although they had to make some modifications to the exhaust that, let's just say, might not pass an MOT.
What? Shot a flame like this big out of it. Did you catch that? Yes!
Yeah, there's one McLaren I heard that sounded really, really good, and that was Seen Through Glasses 540C, and he had the full Larini system on it with sports cats and everything, and that did sound amazing. That did sound more sort of Ferrari-like, but that was it. Like, that was the one. And it's not like the others sound bad, it's that they just don't sound as exciting as you'd like. The rest of the McLaren bit is pure, simple supercar. I like it. I don't know why no one's really talking about the Artura, because everyone that seems to drive it really, really likes it and they rave about it. But I don't know, maybe McLaren have just fallen out of favour, or they just took too long to deliver it, but nobody seems that excited. And I know a lot of people that are more interested in the 296, but I also know a lot of people that are just... They could have a 296. They could. They're just not interested. And I think for me, it's boiling down to a couple of fundamental things. First off, they are becoming rapidly more expensive. So earlier on we did a check, and a Murcielago at launch would have cost the equivalent of today just under £290,000, £280,000. And remember, there wasn't a lot to spec back then either. The options list wasn't what it is now. You know, you'd have the e-gear system, which back then we all thought was a good idea and all that. So let's just call it 300 grand, just to be kind to it. But a spec'd up Revuelto, now I'm not sure they've even officially announced the price of it, but I know there are people online who've bought them and they're like £500,000 plus.
Yep.
And that's a huge price increase. Same for the Ferrari. You know, you could have a not crazy, but a nicely spec'd 458 for, just 200 something thousand quid. Now, the 296, 300 odd thousand quid. One of the press MC20s, a Spider, is doing the rounds, I think it was £307,000, over 300,000 quid.
Wow.
And you're like, in the last few years, I think we had a golden period for a bit where finance was really cheap, car prices were holding really well, so you could go and buy a new or nearly new Lamborghini, and actually it wouldn't cost you all that much money. Now it is. The price of buying has gone up, the price of finance has gone up, like, it's not as cheap as it was. I think there's a lot of people who maybe could have it a few years ago that are now going, you know what, I'm all right, actually. The other thing for me is that with this increasing hybridization and electrification, you've got the sort of twin threat of stuff just being a little bit less flamboyant. You know, I like my supercars to be shouty, loud, be like, hello everybody, I've arrived. Yeah. But they're also now reaching a level of performance which is just bonkers.
Like 1,000 horsepower out of the new Revuelto.
Yeah.
It's just...
But we also live in a world where 1,000 horsepower, like 10, 15 years ago, when the Bugatti Veyron came out with 1,000 horse, 1,000, everyone was like, no. Well, 1,000 horsepower, and it won't just break the minute you drive it. Like, that's incredible. Now, can you imagine if a new car maker came out, so we've built an electric supercar, how much power does it have? 1,000 horsepower. People would go, oh.
Is that all?
Yeah, is that it? The Lotus Electra, an SUV, is going to have 900 horses, and it'll cost, I think, less than 100 grand or thereabouts. Like, that's obscene. And, let's face it, like, okay, I know around the Nürburgring that this would probably still hand a 900 horsepower Electra its backside. But in the real world, where you just need to dash out or, do a bit of a 0 to 60 pull, or, if you're an American, you live your life a quarter mile at a time, these electric cars are just going to wipe the floor with everything.
Yep.
And that's a shame, because to me, I think people wound up going down the rabbit hole of looking at performance numbers and stats and facts and figures, and that's always been a part of the supercar experience, but with the advent of turbos, all-wheel drive, automatic gearboxes, dual clutches, that sort of thing, the on-paper advantage of the supercar is largely gone. But to me, that was never important. It's about, we're doing 22 mile an hour.
And I feel like I'm in a race car.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like when I bought this car, part of the reason I got this one, or a Scuderia, is because you open the door, you greet it with all this carbon fibre, you sit down, you put the harness on. It's theatre. Like I've been talking a lot recently about how I'm getting into biking, and a part of it is like that ritual of like, get all your stuff on, get your helmet on, get your gloves on. Like it's that process of readying yourself for what's to come, and this, it's the same, and I love it for that. I mean, it's not slow either.
No.
But that's never really bothered me all that much.
One of the things you were just saying is about how it's the raw numbers, the 0 to 60 times, the top speed being one of the main sort of characteristics that are used in the marketing. And that's our fault as consumers for actually caring about that stuff and, bragging to our mates about how much horsepower our new car has. But at least one manufacturer, Gordon Murray Automotive, has tried to talk about, albeit a hypercar, on the basis of just the driving experience. He hasn't really talked about, the numbers so much, maybe because they're not good, I don't know. But I think also more and more brands are starting to see that it's the experience, and somehow you've got to find a way of getting the fun factor across.
No, absolutely.
Maybe there needs to be a JayEmm fun factor rating. There you go. Manufacturers can put that as a little sticker on their car.
Yeah, but it is one of the things one of the reasons that I do my reviews on the road is because I am driving road cars, and guess what? Whether I come down this road in a Fiat 500 or the latest and greatest Ferrari, the speed limit is the same. And the fact is that even the Fiat 500 now will get to it fairly easily. So what's important to me is, can you have fun? Can you enjoy yourself without having to go excessively fast? And to me, a proper supercar, the answer should always be like, yes, you can. I know if we were going down here in an Aventador, we'd still be having a laugh. Maybe on occasion a bit of a panic if a lorry came the other way. But it's full of drama and theatre, which I think is so... It's so difficult to explain to some people, because you'll always get people out there, and I'm going to make a guess here and possibly upset a few people and say a lot of them are Americans, because I get a lot of comments from people going, well, my Mustang's been modified and it'll beat your Ferrari in a drag race, ergo, it's better. No. Yeah, just no, it's not. Like, there's so much more to it. It's the feel of the steering, it's the noise that it makes, it's the whole sensation of just being in it.
Sitting really low to the ground, feeling like you literally you could just touch the ground with your hand if the door was open, and that dynamic feel to the suspension, it's a different thing.
The other thing to me that's also really, really changed of late, and this links in with what I was talking about earlier about the affordability of these cars, is it would have been the case up to probably about 10 years ago, where a new car came out and it's 200 grand, and okay, that's a lot of money, I can't afford it. But in 10 years, it will have depreciated, it will be cheap. 355s, they were 100 grand, they dropped to about 35. 550s, they were 150 grand, they dropped to about 35. 911 GT3s, I know they're not a supercar, but to make the point, they dropped to about 35 grand, an affordable sum. It was always that delightful pub argument of like, do you want a new, call it M3, or do you want like a used Porsche or Ferrari or something? And you go, look, I know I'm going to take the risk, and Testarossas were like 40 grand. The Countach was like not, I think, much more. You could buy them relatively cheaply, because everybody knew that to run one was going to be ruinous and difficult and expensive and everything else. But people were happy to take the risk because they got bought by people that just loved them. Now they've been gobbled up by people that buy them as an investment, which makes me very, very sad indeed, because they're just so much more than that. And, to see them just being used to try and make a bit of money, it defeats the point of the car, and it takes them out of the hands of people that would otherwise be enjoying them. And I think it's really, really important that these cars are out there, are used, are enjoyed by people, because this is how you inspire the next generation. You know, this is how you get them interested. There's a lot of kids out there I meet, like their dream car is a Tesla.
That's wrong.
Yeah, I know, but that's how it is. Because, you know, they don't understand anything beyond like 0 to 60 numbers, this, that, and the other. And they probably think these are, you know, evil for the planet as well.
Now, I think there's one thing we have to say though, and that is, it's not the manufacturer's fault. I'm pretty sure that if the manufacturers could, they would make cars just like this all day long. Of course, in the interest of reducing emissions, saving the planet, cars have been dulled down. I think one thing that might be a little bit unfair on just the car community in general is sound. Like, for example, again, not a supercar, GTR, but one of the reasons why the GTR had to be withdrawn from Europe was because tyre noise. The tyre noise exceeded the next generation of noise regulations for a passenger car. They missed out on being classed as a sports car, which had a higher threshold, because if the seat was lower, it would have been classed as a sports car, but the lowest setting could not reach the threshold for a sports car. But when we're getting to the point where the tyres are too loud, I think we might be taking it a bit far. I think the regulations might be, I don't know, just a bit too much. Like, it's like saying, right, some of us don't like hip hop, so that's it, hip hop's banned. But then you'll allow other sounds like lawnmowers or hedge trimmers all day long on a Sunday when all you're trying to do is sleep off your hangover from Saturday night.
You've just put the idea of a hip-hop lawnmower in my head now. Just, you know, just hear it in the morning, like, you know, the beat starts, you're like, that's Graham doing the lawn again. Know that anywhere.
I wouldn't mind if a lawnmower sounded like hip hop, but
hip-hop lawnmower.
let's face it, it doesn't.
But the other thing as well that I find just absolutely fascinating when it comes to the supercar is that so many concessions have been made in the last like 15 years towards practicality. You know, they've all got automatic gearboxes now, they've got suspension lift, they've got sat-nav, they've got reversing cameras, parking sensors, all sorts of stuff that took a huge effort to put into low volume cars. They don't get driven any more than they ever did. You know, the whole point was that a supercar, you know, of yesteryear was a bit tricksy, was a bit difficult. You didn't want to take it in a multi-storey car park, it would be horrible, you'd beach it. Nowadays, you haven't got those concerns. They're built better, they last longer, they're better on fuel, you know. A McLaren is a super usable car, and a supercar, people don't drive them though.
And this is the tragedy. They're more drivable than ever, but driven less than ever.
Yeah.
Just sitting there as a hunk of metal, hopefully appreciating in value. I saw the other day? There was a car that had like 15 miles on it. Oh, it was in another YouTuber's video. It was a Ford GT, had 15 miles on it, and still had the dealership sticker on the window.
Yeah, why?
Why?
What's the point?
It's a tragedy.
It is. It is a tragedy. And it's so irksome because it feels like people are just always coming up with reasons to not drive their supercar. And you know, the thing is, the one thing that makes them so much different is really how they drive, how they feel. Because the supercar really should be focused on driver and driver alone. And the fact that you can get a passenger seat, you should consider yourself lucky. You know, yeah, I do worry that, you know, for the people who actually would want them and are willing to put up with them, the market is just not going their way. There's, you know, I think there are more cars that have come out in the last like 4 years that are the like £2 million variety than of the £200,000 variety. You know, it used to be if you got 200 grand to spend, that was a good amount of money to get your hands on a lot of supercars. Now, I wouldn't even get you the base model.
Could that be a part of what's killing the supercar as well, the hypercar? I mean, why would you build a supercar when you can build a hypercar, sell a few of them for millions,
yeah,
and make a ridiculous profit? And I don't even know where all these billionaires are coming from that can afford these cars.
I think for some manufacturers that's definitely an appeal, because also you know that these cars have got even less of a chance of being used than other stuff, if by virtue of the fact that people buying them have probably got 50 other cars anyway. So it's going to be a piece of art, it's going to sit there, so if it doesn't really work properly, it doesn't matter. And the profit margin on them is going to be huge. I mean, in companies like Pagani, look at Pagani's Honda was 300 grand. Now they're like, you know, what's a Pagani, 2.5, 3, 4 million?
Yep.
You know, so you're like, and I don't think the car has become 10 times more advanced or 10 times more complex to build in that time. He's just realised what he can charge for his craft, and fair play to the guy. He's built an amazing brand. But if you look at McLaren now, a lot of their interest, a lot of their focus on social media is on these super expensive options, you know, $100,000 paint jobs, that sort of stuff, because they're just going for the huge profit margin customers. And I don't know, I think that's sad, because I think there should be, the supercar shouldn't be, you know, for everybody, but I think everybody should have the hope of being able to have one.
Yes, and that for me is key. Now, I've told you many times, James, my story, where I started in life. I found myself homeless when my parents had left the country, and the one thing that kept going through my head, that kept pushing me on, that pushed me through university, that pushed me to get my first job in IT, that pushed me to start my first business, and I've had 3 or 4 if you count YouTube stuff, was the desire to own a supercar. That's the thing that pushed me. Every time I thought, right, I'm having to couch surf again, but don't worry, you'll figure it out and you'll get back on track again. The thing that made me grind and work, like literally 27.5-hour weekends. I was working almost as much in 2 days as most people would work in a week in order to move forward. And that was this desire to own a supercar. That was the ambition for me. And at the time, a supercar was 100 grand. And that did not seem entirely out of reach, as long as I could get to a certain kind of job. I was thinking if I could get a 100 grand job, I'd be able to buy a 100 grand supercar. Obviously, I realised later it doesn't work quite like that.
I wish it did.
Indeed. But, you know, that was the thing that drove me. But if most of the cars are $500,000, $750,000, $1 million, $2 million.
And not depreciating. Lovely if you're in that world, but for everyone else.
Starting from where I was, I think not having something like, say, this, well, maybe not the Scud, but you know, the car of the time would be the 355 and the 348. For me, not having something like that conceivably within reach, I might have given up. I might have just been like, oh well, I'll just get a job at McDonald's and have a simple life. But it was that ambition to be able to have something like this that was pushing me. And I think that's the tragedy, that if we lose the supercar, we're going to lose some of that ambition, some of the hope and drive.
Although, let's just spare a moment. Let's send some thoughts and prayers to our followers who grew up wanting a Skyline. Because, I mean, let's face it, Ferraris were always expensive, but the whole point of Skylines, Supras, NSXs, RX-7s was to give you that Ferrari beating performance. But this is the other thing. You can't say your GTR is a supercar because it's got to be called a Supercar Slayer.
Yes.
And you can't call it a Supercar Slayer if it is just a supercar.
No.
So, but these were cars that were super affordable. I mean, you could buy them for, like, you know, very, very little money, like, you know, new Ford Focus money for a long time. And now I'd have to sell this and find money to buy like a nice R34 GTR V-Spec 2 or whatever.
Hey, even back in the day, one of the first ever performance cars I ever drove was a Sierra Cosworth.
Oh.
And those were often nicknamed Ferrari killers.
Yeah.
And 600,000 one went for the other day.
Yeah, Ferrari killer, that's what they call it in the auction house now. Not down South End.
So I don't know what we're going to do, James, but I worry for the supercar, and I worry that it's not going to be with us for much longer.
Yeah, I think there's only one thing that we can do, which is to enjoy them for as long as we can, and we've got them. So if it's all right by you, that's what I'm going to carry on doing.
I think so.
Yep. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. And oh look, it's not a supercar. It's nice though. Miserable bastard. Anyway, big thanks to everyone for tuning in. As ever, don't forget, hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already. You've made it to the end of the video. Why haven't you subscribed? If you have, thank you. If you've not, do it. And yeah, we'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.